Okay, and we're live. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We are virtually connecting with OLC Innovate and our on-site folks, Sundi Richard, Rolin Moe, and Chris Gilliard, who are going to take us on a tour of the innovation installation. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Mark, you want to start?
Okay, I unmuted myself. Hi, I'm Mark Wilson. I'm a retired scientific glassblower, now a community college student in Oakland, California.
And Chrissy? Chrissy, you want to?
Yep. Hi, Chrissy Lukens, Director of Academic Technology at St. Norbert College in De Pere, Wisconsin.
Ken?
I think Ken's frozen.
No, I'm here. I was trying to tweet stuff out. Sorry. I'm Ken Bauer. I'm a nerd and a geek, and I'm a computer science professor here in Guadalajara, Mexico.
And Apostolos?
Hi, everyone. My name is Apostolos, but I often go by AK. I'm coming to you from UMass Boston. I wear many hats here, educational troublemaker and applied linguistics program manager being my two main hats.
And on-site folks, Sundi, some introductions.
Hi, I'm Sundi Richard, and I'm about to work at Davidson College as an instructional designer, and I'm here with...
I'm Rolin Moe, and I am the Director of Academic Innovation at Seattle Pacific University.
Chris is going to join us a little bit later when we're at the end of the exhibit.
Okay.
He'll introduce himself then.
So Chris is going to tag in for the second half, and I appreciate you guys tagging along with us. We have Daryl Tate from University of Arkansas Little Rock, who is filming, because we changed things up from how we did the project last year. About that as we walk through the installation. So
cool.
Never to start. So when we were last year doing this, it was a static. Can you guys still hear me? There's some sort of. When we did this last year, it was a historical look at the past of innovation, 2,500 years of what the term has meant and how it's evolved over time. Two separate conclusions. One being innovation is such a contested term, it's almost a non-concept. It's a value rather than any sort of policy or process or project. So it's a vessel you put your hopes in rather than a foundation you build your products on. But at the same time, more and more in government, economics, in education, we are building foundations on innovation. So we have to somehow negotiate that term and figure out how we can utilize it so we're getting some sort of benefit while not just buying into hype and dealing with the bycatch of what this could be. So with that in mind, we did the second year of this installation. The other thing is, at an academic conference, it's not a great thing to just have a static space. People don't know how to interact in it. So people would come in expecting to be jazzed and really taken aback by vendors, and we were a languid space for people to stand and reflect. So we changed it up a little bit to be a little more active. We still have the installation, but what we've been doing every session is interviewing somebody to talk about how, in their specific context, they wrestle with innovation. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the tour, which gives the grounding, and then we'll pass to Chris, who's one of the subjects that we interviewed, to talk about how he has worked with this word in his work. When you come here to the Sheraton and the Lanyap level, there's one over on the Waterbury side, and then there's another one right off the escalator. And we have two different posters set up at that. And the idea is, you get a different understanding of how we're looking at innovation. But I put both the posters in one place for easy discussion. So one of them is, posters are images from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They recently open accessed 375,000 of their images. So in this space is trying to continuously define innovation. So often I hear people say, well, what does innovation mean to you? And that's really a conceptually bereft conversation to have. It's not, innovation's an empty vessel. So it's really about how innovation works in situated contexts. So we're looking at that as we move through these spaces. So we have the thing about looking at that shifting space, a different meaning for different stakeholders, but then also asking, if we just have a shifting concept, is it in fact a non-concept? Is this something that does not have any meaning at all? Is there more harm done than help if we innovation, knowing that historically it really hasn't had any meaning? So once you have that introduction and you're confused and troubled, we move on to what are the definitions that exist in society today? What's in the literature on innovation? And so we find that to get to academic innovation, there are actually 4 different definitions that we all build from. The first one's the one we're most the technological one. Innovation is a product. So this is Joseph Schumpeter, coming out of 1912, who's saying that innovation is the introduction of something that is new. And this is what introduction, it was Schumpeter's work that led to Clayton Christensen talking about disruptive innovation. Think about educational innovation and academic innovation, it's not just technology. And that comes from rural sociologist Everett Rogers and his diffusion of innovations. And he's talking about it being a process. So taking a new idea and putting it in front of the population. So what's interesting is Schumpeter was writing in the early 20th century and Rogers was writing in the late 20th century. And somewhere right around 1975, 1980, they get conflated. So you have technological innovation and social innovation. And so there's this idea that it's the technology that's going to deliver the social good. We haven't really been able to separate those two. But they're 2 separate definitions. We have a third definition, and this is going to come from educator George Koros, the innovator's mindset. Innovation is not a product, it's not a process, but it's a way of thinking about doing things better. So this is trying to harness that idea of the value of innovation. So if we manifest innovativeness, then we're going to be able to do wonderful things. So innovation there is about creation and construction and rethinking how we approach teaching and learning, being nimble, being flexible. The fourth definition comes again from the early 20th century, but it's a very different one. This is from Thorstein Veblen, who was writing earlier than Schumpeter. What he was saying was no such thing as progress unless it furthers the social aims of a culture. If you have entrepreneurs in society, all you're getting is products and services rather than any sort of benefit. And so to have innovation, you must have a social root and a social distinction. And I think a lot of us could argue that that is lost in how we currently think about innovation. All of those different but academically rigorous definitions lying around, how do we make sense of this term? How do we put it into any sort of context that can have meaning in the work that we do as practitioners, as scholars, as staff, as administrators, as faculty members? So there are 2 kind of takeaways we're looking at before we get into the conversation. And the first one's going to be that when we use the word innovation, we're thinking a lot less about a process or a product and a lot more about the intention that we have on something. So one of the speakers we had, box. So it's where we put the things that we want out of education. It's where we assume, we've talked about it, and Chris will get into this. If you have a hope box based on innovation, then you are somewhat assuming that there's something broken about education, or education is fully broken, and we need that hope box to be able to solve this. If we're all about emotive, that's a personal expression, and so that lacks that conceptual space where we can actually build something on top of that. Today, it's fair to say, when we use the term innovation, we are trying to talk about something positive, which if you look at this picture again, this is a Renaissance picture, the slaying of the unicorn, a tapestry created about 100 years before the English Reformation. And during the English Reformation, innovation was a pejorative. It was a word that could get your ears cut off, or your tongue cut out, or your head cut off. The second part that we have is, despite that emotive context, we do use this word to create some sort of education. So this has been a catalyst to provide millions upon millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of funding and energy and staff dedicated to energize, revitalize, rethink, re-engineer this concept of innovation. And we use the word innovation, but often we use it where it's kind of when I was talking to Adam Kroom, it made me think of the movie Arrival, where we're trying to interpret the language of other people. When we say innovation, it's a starting point for whether we're talking about change, reflection, revolution, novelty, reformation, reconciliation, all of these different terms that historically have had meanings in education. Now we just throw under this blanket innovation, and it's our job as the practitioners to try and make sense of that and work alongside it. Is to get into, and I guess this would be a good time if there are any questions at this point on the installation in general, taking this kind of present day practitioner look at innovation while trying to stay critical.
I have a quick question. There were QR codes on the posters that you had. Can you share those QR codes and just curious what that takes you to?
Oh, so the QR codes are coming from, all of this is linked online through the Story app, which is a museum-based app to be able to bring collections into a digital realm where you can augment them. And so all of these link back to presence. So if you were to do the QR code, or what we can do is we can get the link as well. There's a website link, and you can go and look at not just these, but the posters we had from last year, the timeline we built for last year, and all the various artifacts that we've been building over 2 years at this conference.
That'd be great, thanks.
So it's what's there as well as a supplement of that to add a little bit more.
Okay.
So with that background, what we're doing here is having conversations about thinking about innovation in this way, having a critical space, but we are practitioners having to deal in this. How do we negotiate these meanings? How do we use this? And are we right for even trying to do that? And so we've been doing interviews throughout the conference with various people who are heavily involved and or invested in the term innovation. And Chris Gilliard from Macomb Community College is one of those experts that we've been able to talk to. And so at this point, I'm going to pass to him to talk a little bit about how that interview process has gone and some of the criticism that he brought up in his session.
Hi, everybody. I think most people who are in the VC already know me, but as Rolin said, I'm Chris Gilliard. Coming to you from OLC. First of all, I want to say that the job, Rolin, you're all cool, having to be a part of it. And then Kristen and talk about it, and everybody's brought a really unique perspective about mainly is how I bring skepticism to anything. And I talk this, and I know Mark is gonna. Mark's feed isn't live, or his picture isn't live. I know he's gonna wince when I say this, but how I talked a little bit about how the Silicon Valley narrative of has been at times uncritically accepted by education, you know, and so the idea that you know, the move fast and break things, or the idea that education is stagnant, stale, and that it needs to be innovated upon. I've got lots of problems with that, and you can read out your waters for a far more informed and critical approach, but it's a dangerous way to think about things uncritically, because when you're talking things that are getting often students, and so I think that's a big part of the problem I see in talking about a lot of this stuff and thinking about it, and in accepting that word as a narrative that never has an end. I'm seeing that word.
I can just grab my phone so it's possibly closer. I don't know if that will help.
Okay, does that help any? The lag?
How are we doing on the lag? Yes, awesome.
Oh, could be the microphone as well, people. Does anybody have any I mean, I could go on. There's been some interesting experiences with how people frame innovation at the conference itself.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you've heard?
Oh, well.
Or the most common uses, or is it just there's not really a common Innovate and everyone's kind of using it in these different ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think it tends to be kind of a cipher, but one of the sort of weird experiences that I've had is to notice the disjointed nature of having academics and vendors in the same space and often talking right after one another. So, you know, on the one hand, we see someone talk about kind of humanizing education and courses and things like that. And on the other, we hear people talking about how, you know, Google Home and Alexa are going to revolutionize everyone's everything, right? Personalized wellness and that, like, so what are the two forms of, like, the two ends of the spectrum for education, you know, to make people more human or to robotic?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you all feel that there's a dialogue between those two streams. That too here at the conference, that there's a lot of talk of, yes, humanizing and critically looking at something, and then there's a lot of that seems to be very influenced by the circle of vendors that we have here. So is there a dialogue between the two?
I'm going to jump on that one for a second. So is there a dialogue between those spaces? No. And last year when we had, at least in my opinion, there's not. Last year when we had the installation in the vendor hall, the idea was for the installation to serve that. And I think it was a well-intended idea, but the problem is when you have a lot of bombast and a lot of flying at you video and a lot of swag, and the conference also is invested in you going to see the vendors. They do a bingo card and you get stamped and you can win an iPad. It's to have a space for quiet reflection amidst the chaos is difficult. We did have some vendors come in and have some conversation that needs to be a lot of cases where the criticism is on this is very different where the technology is. As far as some emergent themes that are coming, one of the things that's come out of a lot of the interviews we've done is innovation is really a code word for organizational management, human development, and coaching people through various processes. It's more of that social innovation rather than technological. And the technological is a secondary or even a tertiary component. And then the second one is, and this will be the complete opposite of what you get in the vendor hall, there isn't enough space for things to go wrong when we talk about innovation. We have big TED Talk innovation style things. We say you need to break some eggs, you need to fail better, you know, let's misquote Beckett. We don't allow that when we're actually dealing with innovation. So we have a conference like this where we all celebrate the successes of what we've done, which means when we try and take it back to our schools and we run into any problems, well, there must be something that's being done wrong on our end because, you know, such and such school had a success when they rolled it out in a small space. We don't think about the contextual elements. We don't ever celebrate the failures so we can all learn from those. I think it's a lot better if we thought about what were the misses so we could engage those as well as the hits. That's been something that's come up in every interview that we've done on this topic. And so I don't know how a conference culture where funding for a conference is predicated on a successful initiative or intervention, how you can have a space where we celebrate the things that went wrong. Because the problem is then you end up celebrating failure and you just have a bunch of meaningless TED Talks. But there needs to be a space where I would hope in the future where we can do that and think about the island of misfit toys almost.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Joe.
I would love to jump in on that because this is something that I've actually done. Now, the important distinction here is that this was about a 60 or 75 person conference. But we actually did, in running a conference for instructional technologists, we created a session called This Is My Mistake, Go Make Your Own. And we did have a couple of people who were willing to be critical about, here's an initiative I undertook, here's where it went off the rails, and you should learn that. And I think it does. I mean, honestly, even doing it in the size of the room that we did it was pretty threatening. We needed leaders in a very small community to take that big, bold step. I don't know how this would play at something that had even hundreds of people, let alone thousands. But it is, I mean, I think it is something that we could figure out how to do, that kind of small cone of silence, sharing within maybe a more established community. Yes, in the chat, Chrissy suggests it should be a conference track.
Yeah, the running joke I have now with Sundi is that we need to have the conference bring in a roving band of disruptors to run around the conference and create chaos that can be innovated out of. So there's a couple questions. Oh, okay. What is the provenance of the term hope box?
I can jump on that. That was in an interview with Michael Berman. I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe Al Gore Lockbox. I don't know. We can follow up though. But yeah, just a place that a vessel, an empty vessel that you can put all your good feelings in, being innovation. On the second one, the difference between novel and innovative. Interestingly enough, when you get to the Latin root, novo, that's where the words novelty, innovation, and revolution all come from. So historically, revolution and novelty have had the most use. And if you think back to the Greeks and the Latin and the Romans, you get a lot of talk of novelty, and innovation is almost an afterthought. Today, obviously, innovation is the one that's thought of most as, I guess, controlled revolution. So innovation would be kind of revolution in the guise of a Jenner Pepsi campaign. That.
Oh, okay. I don't even know if I want to take that one. Does anyone else have any thing they wanted to add?
It's been quiet. I know you want to say something.
I'll add something in, actually, Chris and Rolin. I came out of the 3-day workshop where we're doing a transition from a course-based curriculum to a competency-based curriculum. And there's this experimental phase where it's a semester-long project where we integrate the content of the 6 courses. And there was lots of content being thrown at us as educators and feeling like what it's like to be a student in a regular lecture. But all of the teachers' ears perked up as soon as we were able to hear from the people that have been actually doing this, and not just the faculty, but the students, and telling us what went right in this experiment, what went wrong in this experiment. And I think it was really, really important for us as faculty and the students to view the faculty viewing that we can learn from our failure of what happens in our classrooms. And that was wonderful to see. It's something that happened in the last couple of days here.
Actually, it was just, I just attended, unfortunately not the entire session, but the end of the session with some of the Muhlenberg folks. And Tim Clark, and they are doing a domains project with a bunch of their students who they've trained as digital assistants, digital learning assistants, to work with faculty. And one of my things is talking about how to get students involved. And I think the unfortunate aspect of the innovation narrative a lot of times, thing I've said quite often is for whom, right? And I think it's been fairly problematic to talk about these things, claim you're doing them for people, specifically students, without their input, right? I mean, there are certainly some areas I think I might know best, but also really important that when we're talking about the rights or path or the trajectory of anybody, that we engage their input, right? And that's an innovation I'd like to see. Instead of having people, what's coming out, what comes after innovation in a sentence? Innovated on, innovated with, we've talked about this before, but I think
innovated through.
Yeah, innovated through, right? Yeah, and I think if we're if we're gonna use it with needs to be through innovative.
This is Gerald Tate. I'm holding the camera, so I won't point it on myself. Oh, there we are. Okay. I've been on both sides. I've been an instructional designer and in faculty. And so it's amazing how it's so easy for us, even as a faculty, being a former instructional designer, that we forget about the formative aspects, finding out what those students are learning in the course. And so I found that some of the best course designs and this iterative process of instructional design have occurred when I get that feedback. And so we have to, I think as faculty and these purveyors of intellectual property, we tend to take offense to how someone's actually criticizing what I'm doing, but the instructional designer side of it more transparent and more learning takes place.
Yeah.
AK,
I've got a question.
there's Mark.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Mark.
Have you had a Sazerac at Lafitte's yet?
Not yet, not yet. I'm hoping to
Okay.
before I leave.
Make sure you hit Lafitte's. So, as a new student, I guess, how can an institution based on a medieval monastery, where everybody has a gown and a mortarboard in their closet, innovate?
Everybody hear this question? Oh gosh. How can a wow?
Yeah, you can repeat it.
How can a medieval institution where everyone has everyone has a gown and a mortarboard, how can they innovate? Well, ARC. I mean I resist somewhat, you know, and I mean we have a ton in common in terms of some of this. I resist in a lot of ways the notion of how change let me put it this way. I think change in some circumstances slow change is appropriate. Yeah. I really am very suspicious of importing narratives from one segment of the population, or, you know, to be more specific, importing narratives from business and imposing them on education. They serve I mean, we can certainly see that in current administrative practice, right? Or, you know, the fetishizing of CEOs as people who now want to serve the public interest. In terms of change at an institution with people at its root, or students, very, you know, vulnerable people at the root, I think it's important to think about change in a more methodical and slow manner, because again, right, the they're not things that will get broken, they're people, right? And so I am certainly not one to say that colleges shouldn't change, because if they didn't, I wouldn't be able to teach at one. But to be a lot more careful about that, you know. And I like, we could cite the project that you and I and some other people are working on as one way to start thinking about that.
To echo Chris, I think there are two ways that I would approach that. If you're looking at the institution as coming from the monastery, the religious definition of innovation is as a pejorative, as rethinking how we worship, and that being against the wishes of God or the wishes of power.
Exactly.
So that might make sense why, if you look at it from that lens, you have difficulty when thinking about innovation with some of those more structurally resolute institutions. And then it was Francis Bacon who talked about innovation in the way that Chris just mentioned, that it is kind of an unfolding of information before us. We're in constant innovation in a way, and we just need to keep our eyes open to see what is truly out there. So that's the perspective on it. But I think the monastic institutions are such a minority these days. If you think about land grant colleges and community colleges and even for-profit institutions. Brian Alexander mentioned 2/3 of students attend schools that we don't think about in Research One or flagship or Ivy League positions. Yet when we talk about innovation, we're constantly talking about it from those perspectives. So what does it look like? What would it look like if next year, rather than relegating historically Black colleges and universities to a workshop on Wednesday and community colleges to a workshop on Wednesday, what if we relegated Ivy League to a workshop on Wednesday? What if we relegated R1 to a workshop on Wednesday? And then the general space was for the majority of students and faculty and staff. I would think we'd get a very different idea of what innovation looks like.
Yeah, I find this really
break it.
I find this really interesting because it's a battle that I've been fighting, because I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy. And in particular, the models that you produced would have been really useful to me when I took this gig, and I really should have looked them up then. But one of the things that I find is your point about innovation as a situated context, that to the extent I've had to fight battles with people who dislike the term innovation, it's because it's situated as something that the powerful are doing to me, whoever the powerful are. I certainly didn't think I was one, but it's something that is it's an innovation from outside that's being imposed. And I think this gets to the, innovation in the monastic tradition happened one solitary scholar at a time writing a couple of letters to their friends, and then the next thing you know, we've got a social movement that changes theology. And I think there's a similar issue that when innovation is situated with the students, with the faculty, changing the actual teaching and learning at the institution, then it's organic and it's just something we do and we support. And when the innovation is situated in groups of people who can force innovation on others, that's when there's a different kind of backlash. So this is really useful to me, and I greatly appreciate it.
No, I think it's important too to keep on this thread that innovation, or progress, or however you want to call it, it's important to consider what the goals are. So again, when we look at tech, where we're drawing a lot of this from, like, the goals really are just to sell you stuff, right? Like, the goal is to for you to produce data and for them to sell it to other companies and collect it and try to influence your behavior. So that's the reason we have Facebook. It's the reason we have Uber. It's the reason we have all these other things, right? So whatever other function they serve, their real purpose is to sell you. And so when we think about that as innovation, what sort of we are, it's not in my interest, right? I might derive something from it, but it wasn't made for me. We think about how administrators think of innovation versus how a professor might think of it, or an instructional technologist, or a student. I think, again, what we need to center is what, for whom. Because Mark Zuckerberg is not working for me, right? Travis Kalanick's not working for me. Bill Gates is not working for me. I work for them, right? So, and I'm trying my best not to, by, avoiding their projects and disrupting them whenever I can. But so I think that's a really important thing to continue to think about.
I wonder if you talk to any of the vendors about what they think of innovation.
That's a good question. So I'm going to try and address everything that's kind of going on. There's like 4 different threads happening right now. Regarding the what does it look like to be situated as at my institution, it's called my role as director of innovation is the connective tissue, but it often feels like Stretch Armstrong. You are instead, you're dealing with the push of administration saying innovate, 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 and the pull of faculty saying, hold on, we've been through all these fads before, and in the meantime, the students are the ones that are just kind of left out in the cold. It's all happening to them rather than with them. And so we're really working to change the culture and make it be about a full community, and understand that at the end of the day, we don't exist if we're not doing that for the students. What baptizes something as innovation, as AK asked. That's the glory of innovation. You call it innovative, you've baptized it yourself. It's really, everybody has that stamp and that ability to do that. This year, I think This year, I think with the with the distance between the spaces, we're on the second floor. We are nowhere near the conference. The conference is happening on the 4th and 5th floors. The vendor hall is on the 3rd floor. So we're well removed. So there really hasn't been an opportunity. Daryl and I are going to go out this afternoon and walk around the expo hall. We were thinking to just interview Joe on the street, but we might instead interview some of the vendors. And I think that I like to believe that there's interest in a conversation in those places. I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of vendors about things. One of the things is having a thoughtful conversation is the first step. What do you do to get beyond the thoughtful conversation? What does that look like? And I don't think that the relationship between EdTech the business and EdTech the research field has figured that out yet. At best, we can listen to one another and be thoughtful, but what's the next step? We're still really trying to do a decent job of that.
Yeah, so actually we're on the past the 30-minute mark, so maybe one last question. Is that possible? Or one last comment?
So many. I'll jump in. It's more of a comment. I'm thinking the whole innovation thing, and who gets to call something an innovation. And there was a comment in the chat saying a lot of faculty are doing new and interesting things and saying, I'm not innovating, I'm just iterating. So my thought was that we as professionals need to have our critical filters on to be able to clear out some of the BS, what is self-promoting and not really innovative or useful, and what really is innovative, even though somebody doesn't think that it is innovative. The originator doesn't think it's innovative.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to lose unless we
Okay.
This is like the circus.
Yeah, it's the moving, virtually connecting. So I don't know. Does anybody here want the last word?
Just to reference that, AK. Yeah, I think that one of the things we talked about last year in the session was why don't we use words like novelty or change or iteration or reclamation. And a lot of it is because innovation is the buzz and it gets the brand, and the dollars. The idea is that the dollars will come with it. And what I've found in my time as a director of academic innovation is I have to seek out the really pedagogically emergent stuff that's happening. The people who are associating with innovation are doing a good job, but they're not having trouble with funding, with eyeballs. And I think there's a lot that can get missed because some people promote better than others. It's when we get into teaching, we don't get into self-promotion. So it's like, I'm just doing my job. How do those of us in support staff and administrative positions help those who are just doing their jobs shine a light and improve practice through that rather than the next bobble that's coming down the pipe?
All right.
Well, that sounds like a great point to end with. Go ahead, Sundi.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming and thank these two for showing us around and giving their insights.
Yes, thanks so much. This was really a terrific session. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, thanks very much. We're signing off.